And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay? Now, what we're looking at is a federal tax law hierarchy in a distant format. And I wanted to show you what we're talking about, and if you go to the next slide, please, we blow that up a little bit. Now, when we start talking about law, and we've got some of our lawyer friends in here who can do a much better job explaining this to me, I mean to you guys and me, but we've got the U.S. Constitution, and below that we've got the Internal Revenue Code, and then we start getting things within tax law like Treasury regulations, judicial decisions, IRS revenue rulings, and revenue procedures. Now, I can assure you that those rulings, judicial decisions, Treasury regulations, and procedures will make this look about the size of the Gideon's Bible when it's all said and done. Okay? That's going to be massive, massive decisions, massive, massive paperwork. Again, we can't re-emphasize enough how important it is for all of you and us together is to stay as informed about this law as we can, because it's going to be, it's huge, it's massive is a word we kind of keep using. So if we go to the next slide, please. As we discuss this, you know, I had a football coach in high school that always talked about kind of the best way to learn something is repetition. So we'd line up and it was, all right, guys, do it again, do it again, do it again. So you kind of sometimes hated hearing that. But as we talk through some of these components, you're going to see some of the things that Dr. Williamson currently touched on in his presentation, and that's by design. So we want to kind of hit on some of these areas again as we continue to move forward. So when we start looking at the individual health care provisions, you know, we've got a couple of big areas. One, we've got the shared responsibility penalty, which that means you got to have it or you pay. We've got some modifications to deductions on your Form 1040, which is your personal tax return, specifically the Schedule A. We've got some additional Medicare taxes that have come out. Okay? You may hear the term AMT is kind of being widely used with these taxes. Well, that's in the services profound knowledge and the way this is issued. AMT can mean a lot of different things, but in this case, we're talking about additional Medicare taxes that apply at certain levels, and then we've got some miscellaneous provisions. Next slide, please. So as we roll and look at the individual shared responsibility penalty, as Dr. Williams mentioned, that all individuals must have essential health coverage beginning in 2014. All right? Now, if you don't have it, there's a penalty. And keep in mind, there's going to be a lot of yeah buts in this, okay? But you have a penalty that's going to be determined and reported on when you file your annual tax return, your Form 1040. There are several exceptions that apply to not having to have the insurance. Dr. Williamson, I believe, went through some of those. Some of the more fun ones are if you're incarcerated, you don't have to do this. So hopefully nobody goes to jail, but if you are in jail, you get an out. Okay? Next one is that there are certain religious bullies. Some of those you get an escape from, and don't have to do those as well. And simply by not having to file, and I said having to file a tax return. Okay, or not being required to file a tax return. Those are some of the issues that get you excluded from this. All right, you've also got the premium assistance credit that's available. Okay, and I think Dr. Williams did a fabulous job of explaining that and walking through if your gross income or your income numbers are a certain level, the government is going to allow you credits against your premiums for these upcoming taxes. Upcoming insurance premiums. All right, so what we want to do is we want to talk about kind of how that works a little bit on the assistance credit and the penalty. Okay, the penalty is calculated monthly. So, and as a step back, as we do this, I want everybody to think about how much paperwork and reporting is going to be involved in this. As we you think about how are they going to know this? Okay, there's going to be a lot of that coming as we work through it. But as you do your tax return, you'll provide the information to determine whether or not you have the insurance coverage in a certain period of time. And if you have to pay a penalty, that penalty is calculated monthly. Okay? If, as you work through the application process, you are eligible to receive the premium assistance credit, you can get that in one of two ways. Okay? One is at the end of the year, you go to the exchange. You go through your avenue, you get your health insurance, you pay your monthly amount. When you do your tax return at year end, you're going to do the calculations, and you're going to come back and say, okay, I fall within these guidelines of the, and it's not poverty, but it's based on the poverty levels, okay? So a family of 4, the cap's approximately $92,000, $93,000. Okay, if you're below that, you would attain some credit. But when you file your tax return, you could go ahead and say, okay, I want my credit now, I'll take it. Boom, here it is in pocket. It's a refundable credit, so you know you'll get that back. All right. Another option would be what they're calling advanced credits, or you can go to the exchanges. You can turn around, you can get the information, you can qualify for the credit. I think the application is about an 11 or 12-page application. And in that scenario, what's supposed to happen is when you get the credit, you can get the advance, and the government goes ahead and pays the insurance company. So per month for your coverage. So it's a subsidy for your payment. So if you're $600 a month premium, please trust me, I'm just making up numbers here on this numbers, and you get a $300 credit from the government, you're going to pay $300 on your monthly premium. Now the kicker on this, and this is kind of where we go, please be paying attention to this, is keep in mind that you're going to go in and you're going to apply for these credits before the year starts, okay? So let's say that I'm right now, I'm going to apply for these credits for 2014, all right? I'm going to go through the whole year, and then I'm going to get my advanced credits throughout the year. That's great. Well, there's a reconciliation on your personal tax return. And if you get to that point in time and your income does not meet the requirements that you provided in the beginning, for whatever reason, whatever happened, whatever changed, you know, won the lotto, whatever it may be, then you're going to have to repay that credit. So what we're encouraging people to do is to really reach out, and as they walk through this process, make sure they stay on top of their numbers. Because you could get into a situation with this, you think everything's going along great, you know, you're paying in $200 or $300 a month, you get to the end of the year, you turn around and look up and you think it's all covered. Well, you may have a $2,000 or $3,000 additional tax bill you weren't expecting. So we ask that you please just pay attention to those and stay on top of them. Next slide, please. There's also some modifications to the deductions on your Schedule A. If you itemize your deductions on your tax returns, some folks will do standard deductions, some itemize. Very briefly, the medical deduction threshold has been raised to 10%. It was 7.5%, and there is a delay for individuals over the age of 65. They get until 2016. Simply said, if you itemize your deductions and you had $100,000 of income, and traditionally in the past you could only deduct an amount that exceeded $7,500. Okay, now that number is $10,000. Know those changes are there as you move forward. Also, in conjunction, that's kind of pounding some of this and magnifying some of the sting, if you will, of this law is that the itemized deductions now through the tax law that was passed. 2012, but that was actually passed, I believe, January 2nd. There's now phase-outs of itemized deductions and personal exemptions that are in place. Once you get to certain higher income levels, those get squeezed, as well as some of the taxes that we're going to talk about in just a minute. Okay, next slide. Okay, many of you are familiar with the Medicare tax. You get a check from your employer. You notice that in addition to your federal and state withholding, there's also a Social Security withholding of 6.2%, as well as a Medicare tax of 1.45%. Okay? Your employer matches that goes to Medicare. Now, what we're doing and what they prescribed is this additional 0.9% Medicare tax on your wages. And basically, the employee portion of your Medicare taxes is increased 0.9%, okay, for any wages in excess of $200,000 single. And if you're married filing joint in your tax return, it's $250,000. So there is a marriage penalty in those numbers, okay? So if you and your spouse, you know, turn around and you're both making, you know, more than $200,000 a year, there's no break. You're getting popped with a $250,000 limit. Okay? There also is an impact for self-employed individuals. that, you know, you're going to be responsible with the self-employment tax and all that stuff if you achieve these certain levels. There is a little bit of uncertainty and confusion, and based on the ordering of the calculation provided in the IRS guidelines, the self-employment losses don't appear to offset your W-2 wages. So if you have one spouse that makes a lot of money, and then you have another spouse that has self-employment income and they have substantial losses, there's not necessarily a netting that occurs like you would hope to see. This is one of those areas that's still a little confusion on that, but if you're in that scenario, I would encourage you to stay tuned. For our employers, once an individual reaches that $200,000 threshold and goes over, they have to start withholding the Medicare taxes on that immediately. That has to occur, okay? And that also would even want to factor in any taxable non-cash fringe benefits in that equation. All right? So that has to happen regardless. Next slide, please. Okay, we also have a 3.8 additional Medicare taxes out there for some of the higher earners, and this applies to individuals with a modified adjusted gross income in excess of $200,000 for single, $250,000 for married filing joint. Okay, modified adjusted gross income is your adjusted gross income on your tax return with a couple add-backs for some foreign income exclusions and those sort of things. And if you exceed that level, you get a nice 3.8% tax on the lesser of your net investment income or your modified adjusted income, okay? So if we go to the next slide, what we want to do is, since we want to get a definition for net investment income, all right? And that's simply, as you can tell, that's going to be interest, dividends, annuities, royalties, rents, and other income, and other such income. You got passive activity income, and you've got certain gains that are going to be subject to this 3.8% tax, all right? And we'll get into this slide in just a moment, but as we start planning for this, but this is something you got to pay attention to. This is something, you know, these are the things that could happen, and you have out of the blue years or something, you know, goofy happens, good goofy, but your income spikes, okay? Also, this passive activity income, and we could do probably a week-long seminar on what's passive income and active income and bore you to tears. But there's a big implication in that as we move forward and do our planning. So next slide, please. So as we start looking at planning opportunities to reduce this tax, and this is where you got to be talking to people, in my opinion, if this applies to you, is we're looking at how we can reduce that modified adjusted gross income to get it below that $200,000 threshold, or get it below the $250,000 if you're married filing joint. One option with that is to make sure you're doing everything you can do with retirement plan contributions, okay? We've also got some options out there versus whether you're organized as an S corporation or an LLC, all right? We've got some opportunities where we can go in with rental activities, and the IRS has allowed us to do some regrouping of those to hopefully put us in an active, you know, or separate, different position from from passive or active activities. We're going to take a close look at passive or active activities to see if we can do some things to maybe we've got some losses, and maybe if we look at that closer and we plan and we get all this stuff in place, maybe we determine that we perhaps become a little bit more active than passive and can shelter, I hate to use the word shelter, but we can sort of exclude that income from this 3.8% tax, okay? In addition, you know, the idea of an installment set is something that if you have something you're selling and it qualifies and you can break it out over time, you may be able to break out some of that income recognition over several years versus having it all happen at one time. But I encourage you in that to watch out for certain related party transactions. But as we run through those components, here's the deal with that. Is, you know, a professor of mine in college told me one time that the goal of what we do is to maximize wealth, not always minimize taxes, okay? And I'll let you define wealth. I mean, wealth could be money that you bring in for certain things with your family. It's a relative term. But as we work through all these issues, and as you speak with, you know, advisors and that sort of thing, talking about them, you know, we don't want to get so focused on certain tax issues that we miss other big issues, okay? So that's just a quick aside as we walk through this. I don't want you to walk out and say, well, that should be an S corp versus an LLC. That's an option to look at right now. But there may be other non-tax or other tax issues that would mean that you need to stay where you are, and this is just kind of part of the play.